1078 officer in need.
What's up, guys? It's Matt from the 1078 Project. Hey, if you're new to the organization, a little bit about us. The 1078 Project is a non-profit organization that's been founded and developed by law enforcement officers who have been involved in critical incidents and officer-involved shootings. Our goal at the 1078 Project is to provide mental, spiritual, and practical support to law enforcement officers as they navigate the difficult times surrounding an officer-involved shooting. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode, and I'll see you on the other side, boys. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 1078 Project podcast. Today's guest is a field training officer. He's a K9 handler. He is a TFO, the Homeland Security, an active shooter instructor, and has been a cop for an extremely long period of time. He's got a bunch of critical incidents underneath his belt. This is a must-listen to episode. I think maybe 4 officer-involved shootings. Today's guest is Pat Dolan.
Then just shy of 3 months later, so that was April, so early July, we get a call for domestic, and I was working kind of a weird afternoon shift, and so we shoot over to where the victim's at, and she's hysterical and says that her husband strangled her, tried to kill her, told her she was going to die today. And he was at his house. He was at their house. So I told the corporal to stay and get a statement from her. I was going to go over to the house. And I got the lieutenant on the radio, who was on the negotiator team. And I said, hey, here's what we got. You want to meet me over here, and we'll formulate a plan as soon as the corporal's done talking to her and he gets here. So we're setting up at the house. At some point she says, he's prior special forces, and he's got guns, and he's drunk and not afraid to use his guns. We don't know if he is or isn't any of those things. So we're going to treat him as such. And so the corporal leaves. He pulls onto the street of where we're staged, and we get another 911 call that he is now at the house where the wife is at, which was maybe a mile from where we were at. So between the corporal leaving and getting to where we were, he showed up at the house the corporal was just at. And and probably that was the best thing that could have happened. So the corporal and I shoot over there real quick, back over to that house, and the corporal turns on the street. It's one way in, one way out. As soon as he turns on the street, there's a maroon Mercedes SUV coming out. It's her car. So I stop short of the entrance, and I get out and I draw down on him. I give him verbal commands, put his hands out the window. He put it in park. I could see the shoulder drop, for the shifter. And then he kind of hesitated. And I was like, this is going to be a pursuit. He's going to run. Oh, God, he's going to run. And sure enough, I just see the shoulder drop again, and he slams it in drive, and off we go. So he gets down the street, and he tries to make a right turn, just like my first one. Tries to make a right turn, doesn't make it, plows through the intersection, hits another car that's got 2 people in it, and pushes that car across the intersection. So this is at FISE and technology. And
yeah, I think our guys ended up showing up to this.
Yeah, so I called it out and called out the crash, and I stopped short of the intersection, and I got out, and he was still in the car. I couldn't see him, but I knew he hadn't gotten out yet. I never lost visual on him. And so I'm kind of I'm past the front of my car, and I'm kind of in no man's land in the intersection, and he hops out of the driver's side. I think he was trying to kind of suck me in a little bit. He was either doing that or he was kind of getting his bearings from the crash. But it certainly felt like I was being sucked in a little bit. So I was moving pretty slow, but gun up, and he hops out, and he's got a pistol in each hand. and it's a gunfight in the intersection. There was a car that had stopped in the middle of the intersection, and it had like a 16-year-old or 18-year-old driver and like her 10-year-old sister in the car.
Oh boy.
So I start shuffling to my right away from them, and we were kind of mirroring each other. He was moving to his right, and I was moving to my right, and we were creating space, and I had nowhere to go. And somehow I matrixed my way out of getting hit by anything that he fired at me. And then the corporal showed up right behind me, and this guy never saw the corporal, and he put a couple of rounds. I don't know how many he shot, but he ended up shooting at him and shot him, and he went down. I think he was hit 3 or 4 times total. And then everything slowed way down. Everybody came rushing in, shots fired, went over the radio. And then it was that slow, methodical move up to him. We don't know if he was playing possum or, what he was doing. So we get up to him, and the lieutenant shows up, and he starts rendering aid. So he's out of play for command because he's bloody now, and he's not on his radio. So I'm on the radio. Here's what I need, and notify command, notify chief, get him up here, get crime scene out here. We're gonna need some more units to, this is gonna be a big scene, and possibly, one for transport, start EMS, whatever. And so he survived, and he was transported, and he sat in jail for a couple of years. Waiting on this case. They denied his bond reduction. Never got out on bond. And then before the old prosecutor left office, made him a plea deal. And he had fired a couple attorneys in the interim for whatever reason. And then his new attorney went into the new prosecutor that we currently have and said, hey, would you reconsider a different plea deal? And he said, the only plea deal I'm going to reconsider is giving him more time or something to that effect. I'm going to honor the plea deal that was put on the table previously because that was from the prior law or prosecutor. And he said, or we can take it to trial, and it's probably not going to go well. And so his attorney went back and said, hey, this is take it or leave it. If you take this to trial, it's probably not going to work out in your favor. And he didn't like it, and he sat on it and stewed on it. And then ultimately, 3, 4, 5 days later, he ended up taking his own life in DOC. So that was a very brief version of all the events that occurred.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately he had done this before in another state, minus the shooting at the end, where he had run from law enforcement after being drunk and getting in a domestic, and they had to actually pit him, and he ran off in the woods, and he didn't have firearms on him at that time, but it was almost a carbon copy without the gunfire. So yeah, that was number 2 for me in like 3 months.
What are you telling yourself at this point?
It wasn't what I was telling myself. It was what other people were telling me, like, what is the deal, man? Like you're a magnet for this stuff. And I don't know. Like, I don't look at it that way. I'm just doing my job, and I'm dealing with what's in front of me. Mm-hmm. If it comes to that, that's what it is. If it's talking to kids in the park, like I'm just handling whatever I'm
given.
Yeah, I'm not out looking for it per se, but if it shows up, then I'll deal with it however I have to deal with it. The last thing I want to do is pull the trigger on somebody.
Yeah.
They always talk about you can prepare for that, but until you're forced with making that decision, you don't really know what you're going to do.
There's truth to that, I think, man, because, again, how many videos have you watched where people are just frozen in that moment?
Sure.
They can't make the decision.
Sure, and it's sometimes guys that you would expect to just knock it out of the park, that would come through and are super squared away, and then that happens and they freeze. And it's no dig on them. They just have never been put in that position to have to know have to respond to that. So yeah, I mean, it's there was a little bit of time I was like, God, am I chasing death here? Like, you know, my wife's like, okay, you can be done with this now. Like, you don't have to keep doing this. It doesn't always have to be you. And it's not that I'm seeking that out. It's just
somehow you end up there.
Yeah. But, you know,
I think to a certain extent, man, it's like just innate, you know, like if a hot call comes out, I got a dog. My dog could be useful there, so I'm going to it. And then I'm at the hot call, and then whatever happens, happens. My dog may find him. My dog may bite him, or we may be involved in some type of, you know, deadly force encounter. A year and 2 weeks after mine was your other one and ours at this on the same day. And again, I heard the call come out over the radio, and it was like, oh, here we go. This is one of those ones,
right?
You know?
Well, and I mean, you know that if you run a dog, you're on point a lot of the time.
Most of the time.
And that's just the way it happens. And the reason that I was there for all these is because I have a dog, because my schedule is kind of all over the place, and I have the freedom to move how I want within the day.
If you want to use that resource, you have to put yourself in positions to use that resource. You know what I mean? And a lot of times that means you're putting yourself in dangerous, high-risk situations, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I, you know, it's, I've had guys come to me and be like, I've been in this career for 25 years, and I've pulled my gun on people, but I've never squeezed the trigger.
Good for you.
Okay. I didn't pick this. This was a choice that they made. I am just doing what I have to do to make sure everybody goes home that didn't make this choice.
If I would have went 30 years in law enforcement and never ever got into an officer-involved shooting, I would be just as happy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Would be, I'd be one happy duck.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, after the third one, I started digging a little bit, trying to find out like statistics. Like, what are the odds of this?
Far more likely somehow. It's weird.
Well,
maybe not 4, but
I mean,
far more likely to be in multiple if you're in one.
Yes, correct. That is one of the statistics. And then the other statistic that I found was 95% of law enforcement only pulls their gun at the range. Of that remaining 5% will pull their gun in the line of duty. But of that remaining 5%, 10% will use it in a fatal officer-involved shooting. Now, that statistic is very old. That may have changed by now.
Yeah, you're looking at like I've heard the statistic before. It's like less than 1% of police officers or something like that. Or like of all of the police officers in the country, less than 1% are involved in a deadly force encounter, like some type of officer-involved shooting. Yeah. Like, I don't know how I ended up in that 1%. I don't know how you ended up in that 1%.
I actually had this conversation not that long ago with my captain, and he said, I don't look for you to be that guy that has to handle all of these calls when they happen. You're just the guy that happens to be there. And he said, you are a statistical anomaly in this category. Like, it's just the way it is. And I said, I get it. I'm not blaming anyone. I was taught at Woodson by the one sergeant that asked me if I was good after my first one. He said, I want people to know that when we show up on a call, whether it's our agency or another agency, that we will make sure that everybody goes home to the best of our ability. And that's kind of stuck with me. So
that's really what it comes down to.
That doesn't mean that I'm going to go there and I'm going to shoot somebody or I'm going to be hands-on with somebody. But if your agency calls and says, hey, we need help, and I go, I'm going to do everything. I'm not going to stand by and just hang out. I'm going to go find some work, and I'm going to figure out a way that I'm beneficial to your agency and make sure that everybody that's on that call goes home, whether it be you guys or any other. It doesn't matter. Whoever's asking, that's what my job is.
That's what our real job is.
It's supposed to be, but a lot of people don't look at it that way.
Like, at the end of the day, that's what like, law enforcement has gotten kind of a, I don't know what the right word is, but we've gotten away from, like, what law enforcement was meant to do, which is enforce laws. And we do a lot of other things, and there's a lot of people that get into law enforcement. They're a police officer for, like, a year, and then they go do this other thing that's not really being a police officer.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's what our job really is. Our job is to make sure people are safe. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that want to go to these calls, these hot calls, these high-stress calls to say they were there, but they don't want to actually do the work. They don't want to be there when...
That's the thing about a dog guy, though, is you can't just go there and not be the guy doing the work, because you have the thing. You have the thing that's supposed to do the work.
I get it. But there's so many patrol guys that want to go and say, oh, yeah, I was there for that call. Like, I was right in the middle of it, and they were across the street talking to the neighbor about what happened at the house the day before. Like, they weren't there in the moment. They were on the perimeter. They were whatever. Like, and there's guys that you need for that, but when I go to something, I need the guys that are going to show up, and they're not going to be afraid that if the shit hits the fan, they're going to go to work. And it doesn't have to be anybody that's a SWAT guy or a firearms guy, a guy that's just not afraid to work. I don't care. Just give me a guy that's not afraid. Yeah, and I'll take those guys.
Well, I'm afraid, man, but I think all of us are somewhat afraid. But you got to use that. You got to harness that fear for a positive.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and I don't mean like we don't all have fear. Just sometimes you got to figure out a way to get past it and do what you need to do.
Yeah, you deal with it afterwards.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the time when you're in it, because there's been so many calls that I've went to afterwards, the search warrants that we've done, where afterwards I'm like, whoa, you know, like that one could have went real bad.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But luckily it didn't.
Yeah. It's got to be. You got to be ready if it happens, and that's my expectation. I expect a lot of the people I work with, not because I'm better. This has made me better in my own way. It doesn't make me better than the next guy, but I need you to be your best when bad things happen. I need you to be reliable.
Yeah, I think that's something that maybe you have learned from these encounters, is that those little things make a difference. You know what I mean? And that when you're in these situations, that you really do have to rely on the guy that's next to you. You know what I mean? And that's something that being an officer involved shooting has opened my eyes to, is that this isn't just something that you read about in a book, man. You know, like, it could happen to you. Well, and take your training seriously and take your mental health seriously. And that's me as a person myself. I need to take all those things seriously, but the dude next to me has got to take those things seriously, because especially like as a guy working a dog, I'm relying on those dudes behind me to see things that I may not be able to see at night. And if that dude's slacking at the wheel, guess who's running in the very front with his firm missile? You know, that's me, you know, and I really don't want to die. You know, like, I'd like to live. So there is a standard that has to be set. And the scary thing is that the candidates in law enforcement, I'm not saying all of them, there's still some great guys that are getting into this career, but overall, you know, the standard for dudes entering that door is as low as it's ever been.
When it should be higher.
Yeah, because society expects way more of us. You know, the standard for what is expected of a police officer has jumped, but the criteria that it takes to become a police officer has went in the dumpster. So it's a real weird time to be a cop, man. Yeah. It really is. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I hope that society is starting to realize their errors in their ways, that you can't just, you have to treat the dudes that keep the evil away from you with respect, or else the evil ends up at your front door. And you can look at every major city in the country, and the evil's at the front door, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, I still get anxiety going to range for qualification. Not because I don't think I'm going to qualify, but because I know how important it is. And it's proven time and time. Like I said, I was a terrible shooter prior to coming to Lake. Yeah. And because of the makeup of our department and who we have at the top, they take a huge priority of making our firearms a big deal. We shoot a lot. We have the ability to shoot a lot because we are a smaller department, and we can break down our training a lot better. And we have a lot of gun guys at the top. And so it's made me much better and proficient, but I still get nervous.
Yeah.
And then I got guys that they laugh it off and they don't care. And
yeah, well, they'll be involved in one of these incidents and they'll take it seriously.
Hopefully not.
At times, I've been the guy that was laughing it off. Not necessarily firearm stuff because I'm intrigued by that, but maybe TCCC I'm not taking seriously. Maybe I'm goofing around or whatever. Yeah. But going through one of these things, it's like, dude, okay, this could really save my life. I should probably shut my mouth and pay attention to what's going on right now.
For sure.
That's just in general, but hopefully, man, law enforcement's moving in the direction of the special operations community, which means you start, because that's what people expect from us. That's what the public thinks that we are. You know what I mean? They think that me and Sean Ryan are the same dude. Couldn't be further from the truth. You know what I mean? Right. But that's what they're looking for, and hopefully in the law enforcement world, we're, especially with departments that are like, hey, don't really interact with the public as much, because there are departments that have done that. Hopefully they're using that downtime and reinvesting it into training, and we start moving more towards the way of the special operations community, which is we train far more than we deploy, because we deploy far more than we train.
Sure.
And you can slice it whatever way you want to slice it. You're not getting the best quality product out there when a guy gets 8 hours of training in a 2-month period.
Right.
Just doesn't. It's not possible unless they're doing it on their own time, which some guys do. And kudos to you, but I got 3 kids, and I got a dog that he eats up. Every spare moment I have, I'm spending with that dog training. So,
yeah.
Let's knock this thing out. Let's move to. I'll let you lead the way on the last critical incident.
Yeah. So the last one was a little different. I mean, they're all different, but was pretty fresh. It's just this past December.
And again, dude, we talked about this on the phone, but
yeah,
as much or as little detail, I don't want to.
So we had a officer of ours whose brother had some mental health issues, and I had never encountered him. I couldn't pick him out of a crowd. And I don't know the magnitude of what his issues were, but he had some pretty significant mental health issues, and I think he had some substance abuse problems too at some point. But he was a giant gun guy, kind of, I think, probably to describe him as kind of like a sovereign citizen almost. Not that extreme, but going in that direction. And he had gone up to one of our parks and he'd fired off some rounds at some point during the day. And I didn't, there was apparently surveillance of it. I didn't see any of the surveillance, but apparently he was kind of acting like he was in a manic state, pacing, kind of looking for a confrontation, very frustrated, agitated. And kind of my take on that was like he was looking for somebody to call the police on him so he could have a confrontation in the park. It never happened. But there was people up there that observed the behavior, and then he fired off some rounds, and then he took off and ran back to the residence. So this was earlier. Like I said, I don't know what time, but it was earlier in the day, and we were coming in that night to do our task force. We were coming in a little bit early to do some canine stuff, just in kind of preps for the night. And so I got a phone call from our other canine guy, and he said, "Hey, we're going to go over and try to lock this guy up before we go to task force. Are you good with that?" And I said, "Yeah. I'm on my way to the station. We'll game plan it or whatever and figure it out." So I get there, and they were kind of game planning.
Had our shooting already happened?
I think it had just happened. Like yours was like around 6:00 or something, maybe.
Somewhere
was it
around
still
there.
light out?
Yeah, it was still
Yeah,
light.
so it would have been a couple hours prior to that.
Maybe like
'Cause
4 or 5.
Yeah, I think I was coming in about 8:30. So it was already being investigated, and like all the detectives were out there on it. And I had heard about it, but I didn't really know what happened other than there was a shooting and you guys were involved in it. But so yeah, I get in and I said, well, we'll game plan it when I get there. And so I get there and they had already kind of come up with a game plan, and I wasn't real hot on the game plan, but it is what it was. And so we go over there, and there's another occupant in the house, and so we were able to get that person out without any issue. And then the plan was to try to figure out where this subject was in the house and try to do an arrest on him without any use of force other than hands-on. But he's known to carry firearms. So, we were kind of trying to soft pedal a little bit and know that we might have to go there, depending on his response. And so it kind of went away from the initial game plan, and he ended up coming out of the house, and he had 2 firearms on him, one in a pocket, I think, and one in like an appendix carry holster. I never did get confirmation where he was holding them, but a struggle ensues. He's able to present one gun, and he basically flags 3 or 4 officers that were on scene. I knew he was coming out with guns, so I was gun up. I was the only lethal gun up at the time.
You said you knew he was coming out with guns?
Yeah, it was advised
Like got
to
intel
us
from the inside?
Yeah,
Okay.
that he was coming out with firearms on him, but not necessarily in his hands.
Yeah.
So I was just gun up on the door just in case he decided to come out, and that's the way he wanted to go. So then a struggle ensues. He's able to pull one of these firearms, and as he pulls it, he kind of flags 3 or 4 officers. Struggle on the front porch. They're wrestling over the gun, and nobody knows where the gun's actually at. He's laying face down. The gun's underneath him somewhere, and he still has his hand on it. But they couldn't pull it from him. Well, I wasn't in the hands-on part because I was still lethal. I was the only one that was lethal at that point. So, as he's down, there's officers hands underneath him trying to fight over the gun, and I see a small glimpse of skin, his shirt pulled up, and I fired 1 round into the small of his back, and fight's still on. And I called out, shots fired, give me more units, and we had more guys show up that were on the other side of the house, and the other guys went hands on. I stayed lethal because I was still the only one that was lethal at that point, and the suspect was able to get 2 rounds off while he was on top of his gun, and after I shot him once. And those rounds fortunately went straight from underneath him straight into the wall. If they'd gone left or right, they would have hit one of the other officers that were fighting over the gun. One of the officers suffered like a small injury to his hand. Initially, we thought he might have been shot, but it was either from the action or just being raked across the concrete during the scuffle. I don't really know. I know I think he had to have some surgery or something. So it was
really
significant enough that it damaged some stuff in his hand, but I don't know what the real cause of it was. I don't know if they even know. So ultimately he gets these 2 rounds off, and then the other officers were able to subdue him. And then we recovered both the guns off of him, and we start, sweeping everybody, make sure nobody's hit. And then everybody's like, well, who fired? I said, I shot, he shot. Like, that's it. Like, that's all this is. I fired 1 round into his back. That's where we're at. And we didn't know where the other 2 rounds went at the time. So then they were rendering aid to him, and they transported him. I think he coded in the ambulance. Their initial plan was to take him to a trauma facility. but I don't think they were going to get him there because I think he coded, so they had to go to the nearest hospital to try to get him stabilized. So they're able to get him there. They got him stable. And I was getting all of this like second and third hand that he was stable. They were going to air flight him out to a trauma facility, but then there was an issue with cloud cover or something that the helicopter couldn't fly. So they put him in an ambulance, took him down to the hospital, coded again, got him back, got him in the ER. And then my understanding was they did some sort of emergency surgery in the ER, which is not normal, but he wasn't stable enough to get him to the OR. So they were doing everything they could for life-saving measures. And they were able to fix temporarily whatever the round struck internally. I don't know what they worked on. But then they got him stable for a short time, and then I think it was long enough the family got down there and was able to see him, and then he coded again, and then they couldn't get him back. So the family has been really good about it. There's no backlash. It's odd because you can't make this up. Like, it's an officer's brother.
Yeah.
That I had a part in field training this officer. I'm not close to this officer as like a friendship side. I think actually this officer probably hated my guts while I was field training them because I was hard on them. But for the purpose of making them good.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But I don't have a close friendship with this officer. So it created a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
There's not been any blame for what I had to do. Like I said, the family's been really good. It was a weird situation. They knew this was going to happen at some point. It just happened to be our department that had to deal with it. But again, they haven't. They've been very, very good about it. This officer's still working for us, I think. They're handling it as well as they can be. We don't talk about it because I don't.
Yeah, for sure.
It would be different. It would be, I don't want to say weird. It might not be best for me to communicate with this person knowing what I did.
Probably.
Or you know, how are you doing? Like, I mean, I could probably get away with some of that, but like, I don't want to stir up an emotion that can be avoided by, it could be done. Somebody can have that conversation better than I can have with that person because I was the one that pulled the trigger. Like I said, they're doing okay. As far as I know, still working, took some time off. I think they sought some therapy or some counseling. I don't know for sure, but I think that's what happened, and reasonably. I did. I went and saw Craig again. He and I are on a really good first name basis. But you know, it just that one. The shooting side was one thing. The investigation side was another thing. I had some issues with that, but you know, we have a new shooting team that's...
I'm guessing this is the most difficult one for you to swallow, I would think.
Not... To be perfectly honest, the shooting things are what they are. We didn't make those choices. The people pushed us.
Yeah.
They made a decision that we had to
I'm just saying the dynamics surrounding it are more difficult than anything else that you have to deal with,
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want anybody to have to go through a shooting. That's the last thing I want anybody to have to go through. But one of this makeup is very, very weird dynamically. You know, because this officer walks in the room it's a reminder for me, or if I walk in the room, it's a reminder to them.
Mm-hmm.
You can get past it, but you're never really going to get over it to some degree. I mean, it's always still going to be there. So yeah, it's just a weird dynamic. We have a lot of people that are very close to this officer. Just by happenstance, I'm not, which I think makes it easier for me.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't, I don't have a personal relationship with this person. Not that I don't get along with him. I just don't have, outside of work, I don't hang out. Like, it just isn't that way. So I think that makes it a lot easier. If easier is a way to be in that regard. But
I know what you mean. You don't mean easier, just as it could be way more difficult.
Yeah. It could, I mean, there's a flip side to that. Like, if I had a good personal relationship with this person, it could be easy too, because there could be a dialogue where, hey, I know you did what you had to do. And that was said. Like, I got a big hug from this officer when I came back from the scene and said, I know this is not your fault. Like, you did what you had to do. So in the moment, that's great. But as the investigation unravels and things get done, like, is that mentality going to stay the same?
Yeah.
You never really know. And so far it's been that way. And the support, what kind of dynamic does it put our department in from a command level?
Yeah.
Because now you have immediate family and you have an officer that had to do what he had to do. And now you've got an officer that's in grief over a sibling. So it's a very, very
wild, dude.
Weird dynamic. And it's taxing, I know Lake has had, shootings. They've had, I think, one or two in the history of the department.
The whole department?
Yeah. And one was like maybe they were both early 2000s. One was at a car that was trying to run over an officer, and then another one was at a car that was driving away from the scene. I don't know. Like, there's some bad decisions on that one apparently that I don't know enough to even talk about. But they go from not really having anything of substance, like significance for officer involved, anything, to I've given them 3 in short time, 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's, our agency's dealt with some pretty significant trauma in the past 3 years. The stuff that I've had by myself that I've created for the department or been through with the department. And then, the accident on the highway.
Yeah.
That one by itself is by far worse than any of these.
Yeah.
And I was right there for that, so that's a whole different dynamic. But
it was a drunk driver, right?
Yeah.
Task Force Night, drunk driver.
Yep. And we can get into that. I mean, that's a whole different dynamic for me. But as far as this last shooting, it's just it's always kind of in the background. It's still pretty fresh, and it's not even, it's been a little over, I guess, I don't know, 6 months.
Yeah.
So we're right before Christmas, like, makes for a really weird Christmas for them. Really unfortunate one.
I think that's something that people kind of overlook for guys that go through these. Like, I feel for the family, of the guy that I interacted with. Like, it breaks my heart for them,
Yeah,
like,
this is not what I set out to do.
Yeah. Sometimes people don't think sometimes I don't think that people think that we think about those things. And at least me personally, I have, how difficult, mine was in November. Mm-hmm. How difficult is the week before Thanksgiving? Well, how's that Thanksgiving?
It's very somber, Thanksgiving.
Yeah. How's that Christmas? But it would be unrealistic for people not to believe that we think about those things,
Yeah, I think a lot of people just think, oh, well, it's part of my shift. When I'm on shift, it's the thing that happens, and then when I'm off, I I block it out.
Yeah, you can't do that. It's kind of a difficult thing to block out.
Yeah, but I think people that have never been involved in this job or any capacity. I mean, my dad, he's done a ride along with me.
They just view it like an episode of Cops.
Yeah. Oh, then the commercial happens and we start over.
Yeah.
My dad has ridden with me in every agency I've worked in. And he said, I think everybody needs to do a ride along with police. And I said, well, that's a horrible idea because we don't want people in our cars that much. But he said, just to get the understanding of what you guys do, like they need to see it from this side, and he's right. And he has no basis other than seeing law enforcement through my eyes. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I think about that when it comes to like mandatory service. Like some countries have like mandatory service where you have to do some type of public service job for a couple years. I think the way that everyone looks at law enforcement would completely change if they just had to do it for like 4 months.
Sure.
Like if you had to do this job for like 4 to 6 months, the way that you viewed the police would dramatically change.
Mm-hmm. We go to calls when it is the most catastrophic thing for those people.
Yeah. Worst day of their lives.
Yep. And we do that over and over daily. Mm-hmm. And that's the hard part, that people don't realize how much we see. Mm-hmm. But
most of us just eat it, dude. They don't ever talk about it. They don't have like a good support system. Like you're lucky in the sense of your wife as a first responder, so you can open up a little bit more to her. I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I said, there's nothing I can't throw at her that.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's worked shooting, she's worked stabbings, but car accidents. But there's obviously when it's me, it hits a little closer to home.
Yeah.
But
just her ability to understand,
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean,
I've seen in my wife ever since she's become a nurse and she's got to see like she used to live in this like little bubble, but now she gets to see these little parts of the evil in society.
Yeah.
And she's so much like, she used to be like, people don't think like that, or like that doesn't happen. I'm like, no, it does. And now that she's like been through this public service role and she sees like the dirt of society, like all of the bad things that society has to offer, now she's like, her eyes have been opened to like, oh my goodness, man, how do you do what you do and see all these, so at least in your case, like your wife has a bit of experience and a little knowledge for you to be able to, sit down and have a real difficult conversation about how you may be feeling or how she may be feeling, or.
Yeah. And when I met my wife, so growing up, it was Catholic church, and I went to Catholic high school, and it was, I got burnt on it. Like I was just over it.
Yeah.
I'd been kicked out of theology class more than I sat in theology class because I raised my hand and say why. And I was told, don't ask questions. Just, this is the way it is. This is the way it's going to be. So that didn't sit well. So I'm not allowed to ask questions about the Bible or teachings or like that. Yeah. Okay. So that was a big turnoff to me. And then church was not a thing for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I met my wife, and she's always been big into her faith and going to church. And so she said, hey, if this is going to work, you have to go to church. Okay. And I did it because I really liked her.
Yeah.
But then it became more than that.
Good on her, dude.
Yeah. So, we don't go as much as we should go or would like to go because of scheduling and life.
Yeah.
It's just my schedule's a little bit easier because I make my own schedule.
Yeah.
But her schedule now, being in the ICU is she's working so many weekends a month, and just not as easy, and days and nights. But it's definitely a part of our lives. And we have a support system on that side as well. We did the premarital classes and I was baptized as a little guy, but then I was baptized again as an adult.
Me too.
Because it was my choice at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that was after we were together for a while, and I was like, okay, like this is where I need to be. This is what I should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always go to church, but it doesn't mean my faith isn't there. And I'm not trying to live that way. I'm not trying to live that way. I don't go around preaching to people. I can't quote scripture. I'm not that guy. It's not who I am. But it doesn't, we have people that can do that, and it doesn't make them a better Christian than me because they can quote scripture or Bible verses. It's just, that's what they remember, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But going through this stuff, like, clearly there's something way bigger than me.
Yeah.
And the fact that I've gotten out of these without a scratch.
Yeah.
It's way bigger than me, and there's a reason I'm here, and there's a reason things have happened the way they've happened.
It provides you with a little bit of like solace. Like, I can rest a little bit easier knowing that there's something larger than me. There's a greater plan here. Like, my God's all knowing. You know what I mean? Like, so there are things that may be getting worked out that I have no clue about. You know what I mean? And that's what my shooting, it's like I found a lot of solace through my shooting. It's like, I may not exactly understand why all of these things happened or why I was in the position that I was in, but I feel like God put me in that position for a reason, and I'm not sure. Maybe it's for 1078. Maybe it's for some other thing that happens in my life. But just being able to relinquish that control.
Sure. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, to a higher power that I can trust and I know has my best interest, for me is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could use more of it.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, in this profession specifically, whether you're public or private about it, like,
I think a lot of guys have faith. I just don't think
they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, not at work. Not at work. People don't want to talk about it at work. We want to,
And that's okay, like, but, it's just different. Like, guys just think, oh, that makes, like, I don't need God. Like, what's God going to do? I can control this. Okay. Like, until you can't.
Yeah.
And you're never really in complete control.
Yeah, and you can try and control as much as you want. Doesn't mean you're in it. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean you're in actual control. Yeah,
we have free will, but that's we can make some decisions, but the big decisions are not ours.
Yeah, and dude, I think I will say that through 1078 and everything that's happened, and like I openly talk about God on the podcast all the time. I don't shy away from God ever. I talk about God at work all the time. I don't shy away from it. I try not to be like very pushy about my faith, but I definitely don't shy away from it. And what I've noticed is that because I've been open and I talk about God all the time, I found out like so many more people are believers than I ever expected. You know what I mean? They just never felt comfortable to talk about it. It's the same thing with like counseling. It's that same stigma or therapy that follows cops. It's like, again, I think you hit the nail on the head that it all comes back to control. Like, cops just want to seem like they have everything under control. And they don't want to go to counseling because it would look like they didn't have everything under control. And they don't want to talk about their faith because that would look like they didn't have everything under control. I think it's that same thing. It's just being open and honest and willing to talk about it. You start to find out, like, hey, there's way more dudes that are walking this walk than I ever thought there were. Like, prior to today, I didn't know that you were, that you were a Christian, that you believed in God. And it's like, you're open and honest and talking about it. And now it's like, oh, well, look at that. There's another one, or like Montana. Obviously, Montana. Everybody knows Montana, and everybody knows that Montana believes in God. But like, he's an example. Buds is an example. There's so many dudes that are open about their faith that just aren't really. I don't feel like I have anything to prove anymore to anybody. I think that's why I'm just so honest about. I really don't. Like, if you don't like me, I'm sorry that you don't like me. I'm just trying to be the best person that I could be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have to disguise myself or change myself. I'm just going to be who I am all the time.
Yeah.
At least try to. Sometimes I don't, but at least try to. Sorry to interrupt the episode, but we got some big, exciting things happening with 1078. As you guys know, we sell merch, and that's been going pretty well. We decided to drop 2 more T-shirts, one of which I think you guys will think is hilarious. Head over to the website, www.1078project.com. Click the merch button. It will take you to our merch store, where you can purchase a shirt. Just so you guys know, all the proceeds from those shirts, all the profits from those shirts are getting donated back to the nonprofit, and it's a way for us to continue to do the work that we have been doing. Also, we have big news as well. We're having a trivia night. It's on 9/20. If you're looking to attend the trivia night, again, go to the website, www.1078project.com. Go to the events tab, and you can register. All the information that you'll need is there. Guys, this is a really big deal to us. This is the way that we fund all of our operations. If you're a business, you're looking to sponsor the trivia night, again, you can reach out to us, or you can go to the website, to the event tab. All of our contact information will be on there. Hit us up. We'd love to have your support. We've also loved to have you guys at the trivia night. I'll stop talking so we can get back to the episode.
Yeah. No, I through our church, it's a pretty, well, you guys do secondary there.
The crossings?
Yeah. So we go to the Chesterfield location.
Okay.
But one of their lead pastors is a former cop.
Oh, really?
And the lead pastor there, his brother's a Dallas cop. Huh. So
that's a good place to be plugged in then, man.
Yeah, they're really good people. But we did our marriage counseling, our marriage premarital counseling through them, and I learned a whole lot in where I was lacking in multiple areas, and by no means have I fixed it all or gotten better about all of it or any of it necessarily, but like going on a weekly basis, or when we can, it's kind of like it takes that armor down a little bit. You put your uniform on, you go to work, you're this persona, but when you go there, you're just another person.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate that I've built a rapport with their pastors there, that like I'll have breakfast with their one who's a chaplain for St. Louis County
awesome.
Pretty regularly. And he knows what I've been through, and I'll get random texts from him. Hey man, what are you doing? Where's your head at?
Oh, that's awesome.
So, and they do some law enforcement specific things for the church community to make sure that there's the families that are in law enforcement or first responders have support within the church. They do events specific for us. They're not on a huge scale, but they're doing it for
That's
the
awesome,
benefit.
dude. Yeah, I love it.
And a lot of churches won't take that step out to do that because it's
controversial in some senses.
Yeah. But they do it, and they're very deliberate about it.
I love it, dude.
So,
I'm thankful that there's places like that. That's why I'm so comfortable here. Steve, the pastor at Gateway, is former chaplain, super super down to earth, and he's also he loves first responders and that servitude that comes with it. I was going to ask you something. I totally slipped my mind. It'll come back to me through this conversation at some point.
Well, the other thing, if you want, I mean, we can get into the crash with the guys.
Yeah,
I mean, that was a big one. That's bigger for me than the shootings are in one category. That's a whole different category.
Yeah.
Complete lack of control in that moment. So it was March 29th of 2023. We were working our regional task force, and we were winding down for the night. We had a pursuit. Guy crashed froggered his way across the highway, didn't get squished, barely. I don't know how he made it. All of us made it across the highway, caught him, brought him back. We were transporting him and then waiting on a tow truck to get there. And it was myself. I had another guy from our agency riding with me. It was his first night riding on the task force. Our other K9 guy. I was in the lane up against the median, lane 1. Our other K9 guy was in lane 2 right next to me. And then we had a county Tahoe, which was another K9 car. 2 guys in that. Suspect vehicle. They were both in like lane 1 and 2. And then another county Tahoe that had a medic and another K9 in it. So we had 4 dogs up on the highway.
Oh my goodness.
And we were waiting on the tow truck to get there, and then we were clearing out, and it was 2 or 2:30 in the morning. That was it. We were done after that. We were going home. So we were, myself and the other K9 guy from Lake were standing at our cars, and I was standing at the I was standing in front of the car. I don't know exactly where I was at. And we were talking, and the other K9 guy was standing in the wedge of his door. And the other 2 guys were walking back towards us. One was riding with him, one was riding with me. And tow truck pulled up, stopped, and then bam, just an explosion. And our other K9 car had been spun around, hit my car, then backed into, it was weird. It was the K9 car that was hit was slammed into the county Tahoe in front of it and then pushed into the median and the suspect vehicle from the pursuit. And then the other Tahoe that was up front nothing hit it. I didn't know what happened. Obviously it was a collision, but I didn't know where the other car was. And so when the collision initially happened, our other K9 guy, watched him cartwheel over my head. He'd been thrown in the air and come down on his arm. And our other 2 guys that were walking back, they were kind of caught in between our cars and the county Tahoe. And it had spun our other K9 car, and it hit both of them and knocked them down. One of them had hit the windshield with his head, and it had thrown him up against the median, and the other one was pinned underneath the back of the car that was struck in the county Tahoe. He was kind of in like this little cavity. And so myself and one of the county sergeants and one of the SWAT medics who rides, we were trying to figure out what we had. Like, our other K9 guy, he was screaming in pain. His arm was broken pretty bad. He had a gash in his head, and he was laying in the middle of the highway. So he was drug out of the highway, and then I looked over, and the guy that was thrown up against the median, he was fighting, he was thrashing. So I didn't know at the time that he hit the windshield. I thought he hit the median, like with his head. So they were fighting with him. The 2 guys in the county Tahoe with the dog that was struck, they hopped out real quick, and they were fighting him because he was trying to get to his gun. So I ran over and took his gun from him. And then the other guy was pinned underneath the K9 car in the Tahoe. And I looked at the SWAT medic, and he wasn't moving. He was face down, not breathing. And it sounds terrible, but we looked at him and we were like, there's nothing we can do for him. Like, we've got to deal with what we've got right here. And then he took a real deep breath, like he got knocked out. And then he took a real deep gasp, and we ran over and we pulled him, and he slid right out. It was like a perfect cavity where it didn't crush him, didn't do it. I mean, he had a really significant fracture to his leg, but he wasn't wedged in the car or underneath the car. He had a pretty bad burn, I think, on the backside of one of his arms from the exhaust. but pulled him out, and I mean, he was in pain, but just by the grace of God, he wasn't dead.
Oh my gosh.
So I got on the radio and I said, I got 4 officers struck. I've got multiple officers struck. Send me everything you've got. So initially everybody thought they'd been shot. They didn't know. And I said, I got multiple struck, multiple injuries. Send me everything you've got. So the air unit was still up, and they just landed in the middle of the highway. They didn't wait for a landing zone. Are
you serious?
Yep. They just landed. We had every police agency and fire agency in that area on scene. They ended up transporting our K9 guy and our officer that struck his head by ambulance. St. Louis County Sergeant was working like a traffic safety grant. He showed up, former dog handler, and he threw our other guy in the back of his county car and drove him to Mercy. I think he made it from 141 and 270 to Mercy in about 3.5 minutes. Yeah, he was flying.
Holy cow.
It was pretty quick.
Which guy was that?
Sergeant Dean.
No, which guy did he take?
Just the leg fracture, the one that was pinned under the car.
Okay.
They couldn't take anybody in the helicopter just because it just didn't. The helicopter's not equipped for it, and they have to sit up. So and our other K9 guy had a broken arm, so it didn't really necessitate. I think by the medic's decision, it didn't really make sense to transport him by helicopter with an arm fracture. So they declined to do that, which not my call to make. I wouldn't be the one to make that decision. So they ended up getting everybody to Mercy, and it was pretty sketchy for a while. I mean, I was on scene for a while, and there was equipment everywhere. I mean, when they were hit, their magazines exploded. There was ammo all over the highway. There was their guns were ripped off their legs because we were on the drop holsters. Their guns were ripped off their legs. There was what else? I mean, there was just gear everywhere. Once we got them medic kind of triaged them, and we kind of figured out what we had. They got them off and taken to Mercy, but I was trying to do damage control, figure out what I had, and the one that suffered the head injury, his dad works for Bridgeton.
Oh,
he was working that night.
Oh.
And he heard about it, and he was doing a prisoner pickup, I think at County, and he was on his way back, and I was walking around the scene, and his son's phone was there, and it had a text from Dad, and it said, Are you okay? And I couldn't get into his phone. Well, a couple of the Bridgeton guys showed up, and I said, hey, tell this officer he needs to go straight to Mercy. His son's en route. So they got on the radio and got him directed over there. And our other officer, his fiance works for another agency in the county. So people flew out there and picked her up and brought her in. And then we made notification to the other K9 guy, his wife. And then it didn't dawn on me right away. And I was like, the dog that was in the back of his car. So I grabbed a couple of guys and I said, hey, I don't know what I'm going to walk into when I open this door. I mean, the back of the car was smashed. I said, this may be real bad, or he may come out and bite me or all of us. I don't know.
Somebody grab a sleeve.
I don't know what we're going to have. And so I opened the door, and he looked at me, and he didn't have anything wrong with him. He wasn't bleeding. He wasn't anything. So I reached in. I was like, well, here's where I get bit. And I grabbed him and pulled him out, and I walked him a little bit. He looked like he was kind of walking a little funny, but it could have been just from being thrown around in the car. And so I walked him, and he was okay. So I grabbed one of the county guys, and I said, hey, can you run him to VSS just as a precautionary in case he's got internal injuries, let's just evaluate him. So he, talk about mutual aid and working well with others. I got this guy to take our dog to the emergency clinic to drop him off. Fortunately the dog's fine. He's still working currently. He's not working with our agency. He's working at a different agency, but he's working, and he had no issues from it. When we figured and I don't know if your dog does it, but when the handler got to the driver's door, the dog usually sits in the back passenger corner so he can see him. Well, when he got to the driver's door and opened, the dog stood up and walked over to the driver's side. Well, the impact was on the passenger rear. So by the dog getting up and walking over is probably what saved its life.
Yeah.
My car was damaged. My dog was in my car. So I had one of the St. Charles City canine handlers call me. He says, "What do you need?" I said, "I had a kennel." So he brought me a kennel. We threw it in one of our other cars that showed up on scene because I needed lake resources to help me collect all of our stuff. And so we threw my dog in a crate in one of the other cars, and that was a sergeant's car. We left the sergeant there with a patrolman's pool car and took the sergeant's car and shot down to Mercy real quick. And I walked in, and it was just lined with policemen. And 2 of our guys were in the ER, and the guy with the head injury was upstairs. He was in real bad shape. They didn't know the severity of it. And then we knew that he had a broken leg and then the head injury. And then the other one was a broken arm. I don't want to call it an abrasion, maybe a contusion or something to his head. And then the other guy had a compound fracture, but it wasn't through the skin. It was a real bad break. And then he had some other pretty superficial injuries. But it was touch and go. They were in for a couple days. They all had surgeries in varying degrees. I think they've all got metal in them now. And so that, after I didn't have a scratch on me. I had a sliver of glass in my department issued ball cap. And I walked away from it without anything. And, the guy that was riding with me, his first night on task force, is the one that had the brain injury. He's made almost a full recovery. He's due back to work next month. Had a few little setbacks, but he went to a hospital for brain injury treatment or whatever. And then the other 2 have been back to work. But, the days after, the weeks after, I went to my command and I said, I need a break. I need to come up for air. I had a lot different response to that than I did the shootings because I was no control. I was one of the senior guys out there. And, there was a little bit of survivor's guilt, for lack of a better term. We should have seen this coming. I should have saw this. I should have been able to warn them.
Yeah.
Not that it would have changed anything. But I felt like I had some responsibility to bear. And our other canine guy felt the same way. He's not much different in time from me on. And he thought, he and I were on the same page. We were feeling the same way. But I didn't have any injuries, so I felt pretty bad that I got 2 fairly young cops that are less than 5 years on, and now they're potential career-ending injuries. And here I am. I've got quite a decent amount of time under my belt. I've been through some stuff, and not that I want to be in a career-ending incident, but these guys are just getting started.
Yeah.
So. It was tough. I was in a fog for a while. They had somebody stay down at the hospital pretty much 24/7. That was not something I could do. I wanted to do it, but there's no way I could sit there in a uniform, kind of guard if you will, at the hospital for I just couldn't. My head wasn't in the right space to be able to do that. I was there every day, but I couldn't sit there. So, those guys, 2 of the 3 were released pretty quick, making recoveries at home, and then physical therapy and all that. And then our other guy, he had a pretty long road. But currently, if you walked up to him or he walked up to you and you didn't know it, you'd have no idea he was involved. Like, I don't think he has any deficits from it. He's as sharp as he was before. His personality hasn't changed, which is fairly common with a brain injury, like sense of humor or any of that. Like, it's still him. Like, it's crazy.
That's awesome.
So it's a big sigh of relief, but shitty that they had to go through that. And I say I'm kind of like a secondary to that. They have the physical injuries. They don't really remember it, but I watched the whole thing go down. So it's a little different for me. So it's still it's a trauma for me, for sure.
For sure.
But it's not a physical trauma. Like, to watch 3 guys get injured significantly and then 2 from county. I think one of them was probably knocked out in the impact while he was sitting in the Tahoe. And the other one, he had I think he had like a minor muscle strain or back issues or something happened from it. But he was out of work for a short period of time. But I mean, I've put out need of aid calls before, but never like that.
Yeah.
That's the shittiest feeling in the world, to put out a need of aid call for 5 guys. And there was nothing. We didn't see. There was no brakes. There was no tire squeal. There was nothing.
Nothing to warn you.
No.
So you said you took some time off of work. What did you do during that time off to kind of decompress?
I was at the station every day. I didn't remove myself from being around the people that I work with. I just wasn't working patrol.
Yeah.
I wasn't, like, they didn't put any stipulations on me, like, you have to come into the station and you have to be here 8 hours a day. Like, they just
come in, leave when you want.
Do whatever you need to do, whatever you need to do. So, I mean, I was at home, I was at the hospital, I was dog training, I still did what I needed to do. I didn't have a car because my car had $10,000 in damage, and it was a secondary impact. It completely totaled the other car, but I did what I needed to do for the dog, and then it's still staying out of patrol. If my head's not in the game, I'm not any good to anybody. But that, like I said, that was the one that bothered me the most. The shootings, I mean, that's a decision that person makes, and we react to that. This one, we didn't even see it coming. So that's the one that stung more than anything, was that one, because it couldn't prevent it. We couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, you just been through like an enormous amount of trauma through your career. So I'm thinking, for like a young guy, what coping mechanisms or if you had to tell a young Pat, hey man, you're going to go through things in your
all
career.
All this is coming?
Not necessarily all this is coming, but what skills or what things would you tell him, hey, focus on this and avoid that?
So I would say probably the biggest thing is communication. Like, find somebody you can communicate with. Like, if you're having a rough time, like, it doesn't have to be crazy in depth of what you're feeling, just not having a good day. Or somebody that you can trust that will see that when you're having an off day, will come to you and be like, hey, what's going on? I don't, I'm not a big drinker. I don't, that's never been an issue for me. So I don't ever like find myself at the bottom of a bottle.
Yeah.
I'll have drinks, but it's more socially than anything else. But self-aware on that type of stuff for people is a big thing. I tell people that when we do our debriefs, like if you drink 3 beers a day and that's your normal for whatever reason, like that's what you do, great. But if you find yourself at the bottom of a 30-pack on a Wednesday, maybe
if you find yourself at the bottom of a 30-pack, it doesn't really matter what day it is, but
true.
we should probably address that.
Maybe following a traumatic incident, maybe you should probably take a step back and go, what's going on?
Yeah, why am I drinking this much?
Guys that are doing unsafe behaviors, like you go out and pushing the envelope of things that you normally wouldn't be doing after an incident. You get into a car and you drive 150 miles an hour just because.
Yeah.
Like, why? What is your mindset that you feel the need? Like, we get in a pursuit, we're doing it for a purpose.
Yeah.
But you're in your personal car and you're doing 150 down 70. Why? Or what, whatever. But I think it all comes down to communication. Like, you've got to find a way to get that release out. You got to get back to whatever our normal is or your normal is. If you go fishing or you play soccer or you whatever your hobby is,
don't let go of those hobbies.
Go do it. Get back to that center for you, whether it's working out or whatever. Do it. Get there. Don't forget to take care of yourself, because sometimes we go into autopilot.
Yeah. And
we just do this, what we think is good behavior, and it's not good behavior. It's actually detrimental to us. I don't know that there's not any advice that's across the board good for any one person, because everybody's going to cope a little different. But I think self-awareness is number one. And just, my wife knew that I was struggling with the accident. She knew that it was bothering me. I didn't have to tell her, but much like any good marriage or remotely good marriage, your spouse should be able to pick up on something's off.
Yeah.
Not I asked you to take the trash out and you didn't take the trash out. Something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
But, you can't get out of bed for 2 days, or you can't focus on anything, or there was a time in my marriage, and it was in the midst of some of the shootings where I was present, but I wasn't present. Like it, and I didn't realize it till she called me out on it and kept calling me out on it, and I didn't fix it for a while, and it was not great. Like I really hurt my wife unintentionally, but I was not being aware, and I thought I was processing stuff okay, and I think, and I can tell you exactly what shooting it was. It was the one where the guy survived. And that was weighing on me, not because he's alive, but because I knew there was this impending court where it could go either way for him. He could get 5 years. He could get 50 years.
Yeah.
What I was afraid of is him getting 5 years when he tried to keep me from going home.
Yeah.
Like that was weighing on me, and I didn't realize how much it was weighing on me. And that's okay, provided you're dealing with it appropriately.
Yeah, I that's what I mean by, it's hard, I think, for anybody to walk away from an officer-involved shooting without something.
Yeah,
without something tracking you down and kind of bothering you. And it could be something as, like you just said, it's like, oh, well, I was nervous for that this guy was going to get back out, or there are just so many components to it, you know.
Yeah, and like, you know, my one from Lincoln County, the guy that shot the St. Peter's police officer. You know, I was processing it fine, like it was whatever, but I didn't have that adrenaline dump till like 3 days later. I was in the backyard. My daughter was out playing in the back. She was not playing. She's older. She didn't play anymore. She does teenage girl things. But I think she was fishing, or she was, I don't know, something in the water. And I was sitting there, and I was paying attention, but I had the dog out, and then I was sitting on the concrete, and then I just fell asleep. Like I just crashed. And my dad and my stepmom were there, and we were barbecuing, and like I just fell asleep on the concrete in my backyard. Like it just, I finally crashed. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I laid there for a while, apparently, and my wife came and woke me up and said, "Hey, why are you sleeping on the concrete?" I don't know. I fell asleep. So I went inside and I laid down on the couch and I slept for like, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 hours. Like it just wiped me out finally.
Yeah.
But that was that adrenaline dump that I had no control over when it was coming or how it was coming, and that's how it affected me. And after that, it was kind of like a reset button. Like I was okay after that, from that one. And then 3 months later, I have the other one, and then that's where I think, not a spiral, but I didn't process. I wasn't processing that one. I wasn't managing that one as well as I should have been. And then shortly after that, you know, I blew my knee out. So I was in recovery from a knee surgery for like 6 months. Mm-hmm. So I was immobile. And so on top of that, I'm sitting on this, and this is, you know, court cases of significance take forever. Yeah. So, you know, 2 years go by and the court case is still going, and I'm recovering from knee surgery. And
just finding that closure, I think, is a big thing too. It's like, I think I could finally shut the door on this chapter whenever it's all done.
Yeah. I think it was partially because it was still open. Like we hadn't gone to court. And he was still walking around, and I'm granted he was confined, but he was still alive, and it wasn't as cut and dry as the other ones, and court hadn't happened yet, so it was very open-ended at that point. Yeah. Now, had it gone to trial,
I can relate to that for sure.
He was sentenced, and then everything was done. Yeah, it probably would have been okay, but in the meantime, it affected my marriage. To me being just physically there, but not.
Yeah, kind of like blah.
Yeah, I was just in a fog.
Apathetic.
Yeah. And she's like, "Hey, get your shit together."
My wife tells me that all the time. You're being apathetic.
But
like, I'm sorry. Sorry, I don't care what we get from Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah. You know, so it was taxing. It was, and I mean, if I could do anything over again, it would be that. For sure. Like, because it affected her. It affected me too, but it affected her so much that it was like, what are you doing? What's happening here? Yeah. So, yeah, it's tough. There's a secondary trauma. I think
that's a pretty common reaction too, is just to be like, you disassociate from the situation, but you kind of disassociate from everything for a while while your brain is going. Because I would find myself thinking, like I'd be in a room and everybody'd be talking, and I would just be sitting there thinking, and I wouldn't have said anything for the conversation because I was just sitting there thinking about whatever's going through my head. Mm-hmm. And people are like, "Well, Matt," I'm like, "Huh? Mm-hmm. Like, what are you talking about?" It's like you're kind of there, but you're not really there. Right. You know what I mean? You're kind of like in your own little world in your own head. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it you know, so that was the aftermath of that shooting that culminated over the course of a year, you know, whatever, far too long. But then, when we had the accident, she was with me quite a bit, and I need to go to the hospital. Okay. Like, she was right there with me, as supportive as could be. And she's been that way all along. But it was just trying to walk through that processing that, like walking, like, why, okay, God, 5 guys get injured. I should have been run over too. Why? Why am I not injured? Not that I want to be, but what did I do? What have I done right that I'm not injured and I didn't suffer anything from this other than in my head?
Yeah.
Like,
sometimes that's the worst place to suffer, dude.
Well, yeah, but explain to me what I'm doing so right that these guys are some pretty significant physical injuries, and I don't have a scratch on me, physically.
Yeah.
But it's still one of those questions, like, what are we doing here? Like, you're in control, but, like, let me in on your secret here.
That uncertainty, yeah. I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you, other than control, what do you think was the most difficult thing from the accident? But you kind of just answered it. You're like, just getting caught up in the why of everything.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that. Like, what did I do to not get injured? Why does this keep happening? And then, I looked at these guys that are, one of them's getting ready to get married, and the other one's got his family just getting started out, and some little ones, and the other one's got a couple of kids that are little, and
it's easy to trust God when things are going well.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to trust God when things aren't going that well.
But it wasn't like a trust thing. It was just like, why are these guys physically injured, or is the other guy is he going to come back from this brain injury and be himself because he's got little guys depending on him? Yeah, so it was more of questions.
Yeah, survivor's guilt questions.
Oh yeah, not challenging, and I never mad. Just what's going on? Why?
Yeah.
So, but I let go of that. Like, it's not in my control. Like, if I sit and dwell on it and what if it'll drive me crazy. So I let it go. And
there's power in that surrendering to the process for sure.
Yeah, it just had to work itself through the process. And once that happened, everything, it's been fine, but it's just a tough process to go through sometimes.
That's a big, tough process to go through. Your whole career, man, it's insane, Yep. And you would think, like, a lot of the traumas from your career would have come while you're working in a super high crime area, and nope. It's
everybody thinks
beautiful Lake St. Louis.
It's safer and quieter out here, and I've proven that to be.
Crime's everywhere,
wrong.
Man.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I've proven that to be totally wrong, that it's safer and quieter out here. But at the end of the day, the good guys all go home. That's all that matters. I mean, that's not the case for everything, but that's what the goal is. And we don't always win, but that's what we're trying to get after. We'll
have to get you out here with one of the 1078, like when we give one time, that they're not going to use a SISM. It's like you know what I mean? So that way there's not like a conflict for you or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be cool for you to come out and be able to take some of those experiences and give them back to dudes that are at the very, very beginning of that walk. You know what I mean? Just some of the experiences that you have and some of the coping mechanisms that you used and, your outlook on some things. I think guys that are just stepping into it, like, because we try to get to them relatively quickly because I want to start that healing process as soon as possible. But I think it'd be cool to have you come to one and give back through it. So it's important to me to take all these negative things that happen in our lives and try and turn them into for there to be some positive that comes from them. You know what I mean?
You can't survive in completely negative all the time.
Oh, no way, dude. Definitely.
Some people try,
Yeah.
but it doesn't work very well.
Yeah, just ask every dude that's been in law enforcement for 30 years.
Or 5
Yeah.
that are jaded. And
yeah, it just depends on the person in general. But a lot of times it's the old grumpy guys that everything's bad, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, brother. Anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here? I don't know how long we've been podcasting. Probably a while.
It's 9 o'clock.
Like 4.5, 5 hours, maybe.
You talk a lot.
Yeah. I try not to. You should. If I didn't try not to talk, I would be talking forever, dude. That's how it was with Fagans, man. That boy can talk. You just let him go. And dude, I listened to the audio version of his. He should. Did you know that he went to college to be like a broadcaster? Like that's what he went to school to do.
I don't think any of that.
Yeah, he wanted to like be like a sports broadcaster.
That's funny.
He should. Like if you listen to his audio version, his voice is made for the radio.
Well, I know he does the broadcasting for like his kids' hockey.
Yeah, for his kids' hockey stuff. Yeah.
Fagans and I, a super small world. He and I, we worked in O'Fallon together, but we raced bikes together when we were growing up.
Oh, no way.
I didn't know him, but we were racing at the same time. Like
at Brown Park or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't know his parents owned that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Until he was on.
Yeah.
I had no idea that they owned it.
He's got a pretty interesting stories too.
Yeah, he's an interesting individual.
Yeah, he definitely is. Sit down with him; it's really fun.
I sat with him a lot on midnights. There's a lot of weird things that come out of his mouth.
Yeah. Well, dude, I appreciate your time, man, and your willingness to share your stories.
Sure,
and
thank you.
I hope by sharing them that some people get some good insight onto what exactly we are as policemen and what we go through our career. I will have to give everybody a fair warning. Not every police officer is involved in this many critical incidents. He just happens to be that lucky guy.
Yeah.
So
lucky.
Yeah.
Nope.
All right, brother.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate you. Thanks for hanging in there till the end of the episode. I just want to take a second to thank Pat for giving us some time, for his ability to share his stories and open up about the things that he's experienced through his career. If you guys want to support the 1078 Project, go to our website, www.1078project.com. There you can find merch. All of the proceeds for the merch get donated back to our organization, thanks to the Crafty Midwestern Mommy. Also, if you guys are looking for another way to support the project, you can go to 1078project.com and sign up for our trivia night. That'll be on 9/20. I appreciate all you guys' support and your continued listenership. I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next week.